I guess I'll just say just a few more things about my background career, because I think there's some natural connections. That obviously identifying as a Black gay man who was raised in the South. I wasn't raised here in Jacksonville, but in Central Florida. But I've lived in Jackson, in a place called Cocoa Beach. Well, I've been living in Jacksonville for the past 30 years. Like I said earlier, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm a professor, associate professor of clinical mental health counseling at UNF. And for the last year, I've been directing the Counseling Center, which is our on-campus mental health center for students, currently enrolled students. And so that has been very interesting. I started at UNF about 20 years ago as a staff counselor in a counseling center, became faculty, and then went back to the counseling center as the director. So I'm very, you see, my excitement about JASMYN having space for mental health counseling is very genuine. We've been, for all these years, been working, and we have partnerships with therapists, with agencies, but it's nothing like having counselors in-house as a part of integrated into an organization, because we do more than individual and group counseling. We are leaders, we are strategic planners, we help with community initiatives and all those kind of things. I think it's just something very special about having counselors being embedded and being a part of an organization. My research has been on intersectionality, and intersectionality particularly with looking at ethnocultural identity, sexual orientation or affectional orientation identity, and traumatic stress. And so my dissertation looked at the intersection of ethnocultural identity, sexual orientation, and traumatic stress in adult African-American gay men. And you know how people often say that research is me-search. I always tell people, look, I'm just trying to help the people. This ain't about me, but obviously it was all about me, but it also hopefully helped some other people as well. So in looking at and thinking, listening, I've listened to some of your interviews and of course in your website. And so I know that there's some similar themes that you address in your work around like intersectionality. Resilience is a huge thing for me. And when it comes to looking at like for our students who are receiving counseling, and I listen to our staff as we talk about them. And my first thing I go to is, how are they doing in classes? How are they managing? They've probably been dealing with these things for a long time. How have they done it? Well, no. How have they survived? They're here today. They showed up. And so resilience is always, at the forefront of my mind. And so I know that you have reflected on resilience in some of the interviews that I've seen. And there's one piece that I really love that really is a resilience piece. And so, and hopefully you see it as that way too, 4 Day in the Morning, that I absolutely adore. And so perhaps at some point before we wrap up, we can hear you.
Okay.
What are you gonna say?
Okay.
Huh?
Your sound went out for a second, but I hear you now.
Oh, did it? I'm sorry. Okay, are we good now?
It was fine on my end, so maybe it's your internet, Jericho. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So, so do you have any other any questions or anything before we sort of officially get started?
No.
Okay, great.
Yeah. That. Do you teach there too? Do you teach classes?
I do. So prior to going back to the counseling center, I spent 8 years as a full-time faculty member, and I was director of, it's a master's program in clinical mental health counseling. So as a director, I didn't teach as much, but I was teaching every semester, 2 courses a semester. And now that I'm in more of an administrative, even bigger administrative position, I only teach once a year. And so once in summer B, 6 weeks, and it's right before the students graduate. So this summer we had a 6-week course. Right before they graduate, we get in, we get out, we get on with life. And so that's really the only course that I really want to teach for a while now. As you know, teaching is a lot of work. And I think many people outside of the profession, outside of the academy, don't realize how much work goes into teaching. And so I felt like this was a good time. I got an invitation to take on this administrative role. And this was a good time to also take a slight break from teaching, still doing a little research, still chipping away at that. so that's sort of where I am now. And what about you? So I see you're directing the creative writing program, and is that connected to your academic program, or is that sort of a center separate from that, or that is your academic program?
That's our academic program, the creative writing program at Emory University. It's actually the #1 creative writing program for undergraduates in the country. And
Wow.
I also teach poetry workshop there. So I've been the director now 4 years, 5 years. I don't even know how to count the years that I've been doing.
Right.
I've been at Emory since 2012, so 8 years now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Very nice. Very nice. And so you've gone through the whole process, tenure and all that stuff, tenure promotion and
I'm full now, and they're having for everyone who just got promoted, we're having a big celebration over Zoom in October, in early October at some point. So yeah.
wow. And is that new, full promotion to full?
I mean, it's like a year old, so I guess it's still
Wow.
new. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a little bit off in the distance for me right now, but I crossed the main one, which is going from assistant to associate. So, it takes the pressure off. But wow, that's very, very exciting. So, okay, well, let's get into this. So it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you, Jericho Brown, to JASMYN and to our 14th annual Coming Out Day breakfast. I am so glad you are with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Very, very nice. I'm excited about our dialogue to touch on issues of the day, including health equity, racial equity, how they're weaved into the fabric of the LGBT community, how other identity issues come together, coalesce, conflict with each other in some people's minds, to sort of think through and to reflect on all of that. I would like to reflect on our current cultural climate, social justice and activism, and the role that poetry plays or could play in helping us evolve from where we are now to the next place in our existence.
Mm-hmm.
So I invite you to read a poem, like I said earlier, unpack a poem at any point in the conversation. Of course, I have my own copy. You can't see it because I'm on this green screen thing, but I promise you, there you go. Let's see, there we go. This is The Tradition, my very own copy with tabs. So and the way that I've been interacting with The Tradition is to just open it to any page and let the universe guide me to what I might need for the day or what I might need for the moment. And so I will keep the tradition out and just continue to use it and to continue to relate to it in that way. So I'm open, so wherever we go with this, I'm really flexible and open to go. Is that okay with you, that we can just sort of be flexible with this and just go wherever we need to go?
Yeah. I can do 4 in the morning, since I know you like that poem, if you wanted to start there.
Fabulous. Yes.
4 in the morning. My mother grew morning glories that spilled onto the walkway toward her porch, because she was a woman with land who showed as much by giving it color. She told me I could have whatever I worked for. That means she was an American. But she'd say it was because she believed in God. I am ashamed of America and confounded by God. I thank God for my citizenship in spite of the timer set on my life to write these words. I love my mother. I love Black women who plant flowers as sheepish as their sons. By the time the blooms unfurl themselves for a few hours of light, the women who tend them are already at work. Blue. I'll never know who started the lie that we are lazy, but I'd love to wake that bastard up at 4 in the morning, toss him in a truck, and drive him under God past every bus stop in America to see all those Black folk waiting to go work for whatever they want. A house, a boy to keep the lawn cut, some color in the yard. My God, we leave things green.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So say more about where that comes from, where
Well,
4
I mean,
in the morning comes from.
one of the reasons why I'm a poet is because I just get excited about the fact of language. And in Louisiana, where I'm from, a phrase that you hear that you don't hear all over the world is the phrase 4 in the morning, which is that time of morning before the sun even comes up. And
Mhm.
for many of us, it's the time we have to get up to go to work. And so the poem's interested in the natural world. It's interested in Black people's preoccupation with the natural world.
Mhm.
When I first moved into this house where I lived, it was my first time having my own garden, my own
Wow.
flower bed I could work in. And I remember one of my neighbors, I was working in the flower bed. One of my neighbors walked right past me to the door, rang the doorbell. I'd never lived in a neighborhood before where
Mhm.
people in the neighborhood literally just came over your house to say hi because they knew you. That was so strange. And it's nice.
Right.
But I really thought that only happened on TV. Like people would bring like casseroles, and the casseroles always had raisins in them. I thought that was weird.
On
Um,
Wisteria Lane.
and my neighbor, her name's Barbara. She rang the doorbell, and I'm right in front of her, and she hadn't said anything to me. And I said, "Excuse me, hi." And she said, "Oh, I'm just looking for the man or the woman of the house." And I said, "I'm the man or the woman." And she had this look of embarrassment on her face. And I remember thinking, oh, this moment is happening because people can understand that I might work in someone's yard, but they can't understand my investment in that yard as my own, that I would have my own investment in beauty for the
Yeah.
sake of beauty,
Mhm.
which was very strange to me because I was from a family where that was very important. My father always explained to me that how you make your home look has to do with your contribution to the entire community, right?
Right.
And that's why when somebody's yard is overgrown, everybody else in the neighborhood is rolling their eyes at them, right? So,
Exactly. Exactly.
my grandparents were people who kept gardens on both sides of my family. And before that, they on both sides of my family, my grandparents were sharecroppers. As young as I am.
Oh yeah.
So it's a way of sort of, I think of the poem and maybe the entire book as a way of reclaiming and looking more directly at our actual place in this
Mhm.
nation and what our
Mhm.
contribution has been, in spite of the fact that we might not get recognized as the people who make that kind of a contribution. So,
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I think of how you address the sort of a false narrative that we're lazy, and it's like, look at what we've accomplished, look at what we've done, and who else is getting up 4 in the morning
yeah,
and ready, and who else is sitting at the bus stop before the crack of dawn, right? And so my mother grew up as a daughter of a sharecropper in rural Georgia, so I get that, and there's tons of stories that had empathy pouring out for me for her from me, because just hearing these stories about literally 4 in the morning they had to be up in the fields when they really were supposed to be in school, but they had to stay home and work in the fields. And so that and there's a lot more that resonates, but maybe we can kind of come back and touch on and bring that back in even in the conversation as we move forward. I think that the resilience focus and that I glean from that, I think it's so important for our young people. They're facing so many challenges, and to be able to say, despite these challenges, I'm getting up anyway today. I'm going to school today. I'm going to work today. I'm going to JASMYN today. I still have to be in communication in many cases with the people that have hurt me. And I still love them. So I think just something about that, and even the imagery of the flowers growing over the concrete or through the concrete. I think just something about that determination. You're going to get there by hook or crook. So thank you for sharing that. Just as this is Coming Out Day, we're honoring Coming Out Day, which is what we celebrate in every October. Um, and also for many of us who have gone that journey of coming out, we would also talk about resilience. And so I'm wondering if you could share a little about your coming of age or coming out, whatever you tend to share. I imagine you get this question quite a bit, right? And so whatever you can share that might, you know, illuminate a path for young people, or just to identify around coming out and negotiating your own identity.
I didn't really, I mean, my own coming out, I guess, was gradual. I'm probably as out as I am now, much more because I knew I wanted to be a poet in the world, and I knew that in order to be a poet, I would have to tell the truth. And so in order to tell the truth on the page, I had to be honest with myself about who I was and what my desires were and what my obsessions were and what what I was racked by, what I was afraid of. And the more that comes out on the page, the more you can face that in yourself day to day. But I think what really happened for me is that I was writing poems and I wanted to see my poems in print. And because they started being in print, people saw them and saw that the speaker, this is not good because somebody's knocking on the door.
Okay.
Ringing the doorbell. I'm so sorry. Katie, should I go or?
Yeah, you can take a second to go get it. It's no problem. We can edit this out.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, of course.
I was concerned about that. I was saying that's what normally my dog is in the room with me. He's like when I'm zooming, but I said no, you stay out this time because if anybody comes to the door, he'll have a fit.
Exactly, I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the time. It's 2:11.
Yes.
I guess I need to sort of move it along a little bit more. Let's see. We touch on some of these: resilience, poetry to heal, stand, poetry to be seen. Okay.
So I think I can start that answer again.
All
Okay.
right, well, let me pop off real quick and go ahead.
As it relates to my own coming out, I was so interested in being a poet that I knew I had to tell the truth in my poems. And telling the truth in my poems meant that it was going to be clear that I was gay, that I was a queer person. And there were many other things that were going to be clear too. And when I say I knew I had to tell the truth in my poems, I understood that if I was going to be made vulnerable to my work and it was going to be the best work that it could be, I would not be able to use it to hide. I would have to use it to show. Often, even as a teacher, as a professor, I find that my students have a hard time writing because they think of the poem as a coded moment. They think of the poem as the opportunity to not say what they really think and feel. But the poem, if it's any good, is going to directly say what you really think and feel. And that's not easy. As a matter of fact, I really believe we are at every turn taught culturally to be dishonest, taught culturally not to be vulnerable. Everything about our government, everything about the billboards and commercials around us, particularly if we're what people keep calling men, that we're not supposed to show those things. And poetry, on the other hand, asks that of us. So I think because poems were in print, I sort of realized in a very indirect and backwards way that I had come out because people like you were asking me to show up. And so it was like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, JASMYN wants me to come. Oh, they read the poems.
Right.
So it's clear to everybody that I'm queer. And then before that, I guess coming out was sort of in many ways forced upon me. I was friends with somebody and they had an ex-wife who just knew something was funny. And she would go ask everyone in our community what was going on with me and her ex-husband, you know, so that kind of also started, that started a beginning of people asking this question and me being put in a position where I had to answer it or ignore it or lie to the answer, lie when it came to the answer. So I think my coming out was very, very different. But here's, I mean, what I'll say about this, and you mentioned this a second ago, and I wanted to say it a second ago. I really think one of the ways that I have been fortunate is that I've always been aware that I'm not the first person on the planet Earth. And I thank God, even though there are many ways that my family has rejected me, one of the things that my family did give me is a sense of history, you know, a sense of knowledge from my grandparents on down to me, that there were many struggles that we overcame and that we survived. And I was always under the impression that no matter how hard things were, they would have been harder if I was dealing with them 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier, right? And so I have to believe that whatever moment I'm in is the moment where I am supposed to be, and that I have been built for that moment, that I have been prepared for that moment, that whatever I'm facing, I am facing it for a reason, and that I could only face it. So when I think about my grandmother watching people, they worked on a plantation where the plantation owners would steal the hogs out of their smokehouses, and then they wouldn't have anything to eat in the winter, you know.
Wow.
And I remember my grandmother knew how to handle that. I wouldn't know how to handle that. When I hear my mother telling stories about how she picked cotton, my mother knew how to handle that. I would not know how to handle that. You know what I'm saying? So, so there are certain things that I think we have history behind us, and we have an ancestry behind us. And when I say ancestry, I don't just mean our family, Richmond. I mean, there are queer people who have prepared the way for the freedoms that we experience, such that we will continue to prepare a way of freedom for other people to experience. And I say that as a queer person of color who really, you know, a queer Black man who really understands my job here is to enjoy my life, to live as fully as possible, to experience all that I can possibly experience, so that I can make those experiences of use in my poems. So I have this language, and that love of language will encapsulate my experiences. But of course, my experiences are queer Black experiences. And because I have the poems, they'll be here after I'm gone. And they are used to people who have experiences similar to mine, and they are of use to people who don't have those same experiences, so that they better understand our experiences. So I think, I like to think that it's not just me, right? That when I'm here, Langston Hughes is here, Essex Hemphill is here. Do you understand what I mean? And that there's a tradition of writers that flows through me, and that I only become a conduit, and that I also am pushing outward, but I'm doing it because it's what I love to do. And it's important that you do what you love to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm probably talking too much.
No, you're not. That's why you're here. You're here to talk. I'm the one who needs to, you know, watch how much I chat on and on and on. No, we want to hear from you. I want to underscore what you said. There was a lot there, but one of the things that you said was that I'm prepared for this moment. I'm built for this moment, and I think that is so important for thinking of for all of us, but thinking specifically about our young people that might wonder, why is this happening to me? I mean, we've young people who, you know, who are forced to leave their homes just because they identify as LGBTQ plus. And, you know, you might imagine at age 14 or 15, and the people that you love and trust the most are saying that you can't stay here because, you know, we found out that you like boys, or you like girls, or you identify as gay or queer or same gender loving. That can be overwhelming for a young person. So, and I just think that that line stands out, that you're built for this. You can handle this. Now, and there are resources. So that's why JASMYN exists. So we're not saying that you need to handle it on an island by yourself, but that when we find ourselves in challenging situations, that's a great first place to go, is that I have what it takes to either pull my resources together to handle this with limited resources, or to sort of organize this space.
Yeah. It's also important to remember, when you're facing a situation where you know you haven't done anything wrong, that you have not done anything wrong. We are always participating in a system that we're also dismantling. right?
Mhm.
So I know everybody doesn't believe in it or like to do it. I'm still a person who likes to vote. I'm still
Yeah.
a person who understands the benefit of the lesser of two evils. You know? And at the same time that I vote, I also understand evil is evil. So just because I get the lesser of two evils, I can't call that the end of the success, right?
Right. Right.
We're obviously living in a nation, we're living in a police state. We're being told that if the police want to, if they know you knew somebody who had what they think of as criminal behavior that hasn't even been proven, right?
Right.
That has criminal behavior, they can come in your house and kill you.
Mm-hmm.
The house you pay for, I pay for this. Do you understand what I mean?
Exactly.
And
And
so,
not being held accountable.
yeah, so how is it that I can participate in such a system? Because when you're voting, that is what you are participating in. Do you follow what I mean? And
Yeah.
yet my job is to figure out how to move that money around. My job is through my poems, through whatever advocacy I can, figure out how the money that is going to police budgets that is wasted. You know, we understand that the family of Breonna Taylor got $12 million in a civil lawsuit, which means that the state is admitting that that what happened to her was not right. You understand what I mean? And if they admit that, they're also admitting that that was at least 3 police officers that they didn't need to be at work that night. That's, I mean, at the lowest systemic problem, that's 3 police officers. That money, I could have done something with that money.
Exactly.
JASMYN could do something with that salary, at least for that night. Do you understand?
Absolutely.
That's a donation, right?
Right.
People viewing this are thinking about how to give and what to give. And one way to think about what to give and how to give is to think about police salaries. You know, how much does a police officer who for absolutely no reason, how much did Darren Wilson get paid the day he murdered Mike Brown? If we think about the murders of all of these Black trans women that have not been solved, all murders where the people who have murdered these Black trans women have not been found, have not been brought to justice. Every day that happens, that's a day that we are paying police officers that they have not done what they're supposed to do.
Right.
You want to know what to give to JASMYN? Maybe that's the amount of money JASMYN needs to protect Black trans people. Do you understand?
Wow. I love that.
And that's the kind of thinking that I think we have to do, that is systemic in a way that we've sort of been taught, you know, to participate and to fight within the system. And we've got to figure out now how to dismantle and change that system. And right now, I don't know exactly the ways in which the amount of policing that we have in various cities throughout this country has been of use to Black queer people or Black people in general. And therefore, that money used for policing, budgeted for police officers, could be put in other places that would be of use to Black queer people in particular. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about in this nation that was literally built on the backs of so many lives that were not considered lives. I'm talking about indigenous people. I'm talking about slaves kidnapped from West Africa. So that kind of thing always has to be in the back of my mind, even as I participate in the system. You know, I always think it's funny. I have to add though. I always think it's funny that people say, "Oh, I don't vote because I don't believe in it," but you pay your taxes. You don't believe in that either. So we have to figure out how to balance that. I mean, as individuals, and particularly as people who are advocating for more life, for those of us who have not been able to experience full lives, we have to think about how we are going to balance dismantling the system while participating in the system. And we have to be very careful about it because, you know, Audre Lorde says, you cannot destroy the master's house with the master's tools. that we are not only reinscribing the same thing that the same kinds of things that created genocide, that created slavery, that continues to create a kind of privilege that makes people afraid to go to sleep in their own beds at night, you know? So.
Right. Wow. What was it? Something you just said that really resonated with me. The imagery I got, the using the police salaries to say, I'm taking a stand and I'm going to give this much amount of money, how much this police officer made that night or for the whole year, and I'm donating it to JASMYN, or I'm donating it to this group, or I'm donating it to, and being really intentional about that, I think says a lot. And for some, it might just be symbolic, and but symbolism is important. And eventually this tide will turn. I'm curious about how are there pieces in tradition or poems in the tradition where you actually address this more directly? I think that the poem title, "The Tradition," speaks to this to some degree. But what about, are there others? You said either in a previous interview or something I read on maybe on your website, it says that your poems can reflect the how love and brutality come together, that you're comfortable discussing dark subject matters and those that inspire joy. And I think talking about being in a police state and talking about what's happening. I mean, just yesterday we found out about those 3 police officers who killed Breonna Taylor, and how they weren't even held accountable for that. And so that it weighs so heavily, and it just is on top of all of everything if we just look at what happened just this year, but this has been going on for a long, long time. And so it just, every time there's there's news that is disappointing, there's news that says, we're still not seeing you as Black people, we still don't see you. But we'll protect these, in this case, these officers. It hits in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So do you address that more directly in your poem?
I think I do. I'll read a poem. I wrote this poem after finding out about and being confounded by the deaths of the supposed suicides of people like Jesus Huerta in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow or another, according to police, Jesus Huerta managed to shoot himself in the back corner of his head while handcuffed, after having been patted down, on the walk from the police cruiser to the building where he was to be booked. Somehow managed to shoot himself in the back corner of his head. Or Victor White III in Louisiana, where I'm from, who shot himself in his upper back.
Mm.
He did this, he was handcuffed, he had already been patted down, and he was sitting in the back seat of a police cruiser. Sandra Bland in Texas, who hanged herself with a trash bag after a day of fighting for her life, hang herself in a trash bag. We see footage of that.
Right.
Hang herself with a trash bag in a cell where there is video footage of her, and something happens. There's technical difficulty at the moment that the coroner says she hung herself with a trash bag. And it's a poem I wrote called Bullet Points.
Mm.
I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag. And if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed, or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass, more than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will do it the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke. or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worst. I promise if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the new bullet fished from the folds of my brain.
Mm. Wow.
So, there are a few poems in the book that are dealing with that part of this moment. But I also think of the moment as a book, I think of the book as dealing with not just racial justice, violence, but also with environmental justice, and a real concern for our climate and our planet, with what it means to be a citizen in a nation that clearly doesn't want your citizenship, or to be in a family that clearly doesn't want your sonhood or your brotherhood, you know, and what it means to be able to participate and yet to dismantle, as I was saying before. So
there's so many parallels now that I'm thinking about this with some of so with what's happening in our world, in our country. I think there was a football coach, was it 2 weeks ago? I apologize, can't remember who it was, and he was saying, we're so tired of loving this country and them and it's not loving us back. I think the same thing happens for a lot of us in our families as we are coming to understand who we are as queer people. I know that you grew up in the Black church, and so did I. And I think it's the same with that. You know, the Black church has been this place where, you know, we come together. It was a civil rights organization back in the day. When it came to civil rights, it was always the church which was leading the way. And it was always seen for me as this place of refuge and rejuvenation. But then identifying as a queer person, it automatically shifted those things. And so it has some similarities. I love, you know, the church, but yet they didn't love me as an openly gay person. I love my family, and there were challenges there. And I'm an American, and I want to love this country even more than I already do, but I feel it doesn't love me back. And so I think a lot of us are, you know, to some of the older wounds that we may have evolved from and grown through get reopened when every time Breonna Taylor is killed and her murderers are not held accountable. Every time, you know, George Floyd is suffocated, murdered in the streets. And so not only are we looking at what it means to be Black, what it means to be a Black man in particular in America, but it's like it reopens and rehashes all of that.
Which is why we have to take care of ourselves. You know, we have to be careful. It was actually difficult for me to get on this call today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, my heart is broken, and it's amazing that my heart can be broken over and over again about the exact same thing, right?
Right.
I mean, that ruling yesterday really knocked me out in ways that I was surprised by. I was actually surprised how upset I was, how upset I am, you know, all the way going into today. And I was like, I still got to go to work. I still got to log on. You know, the people at JASMYN need me.
Yes.
You know, this is something I never had. When I was a teenager, I never saw anything like a person doing what I'm doing. And so when I do what I do, I'm doing it really for me. Like I'm doing it for my idea of my 14 or 15 or 16-year-old self. That I'm talking to me, I'm trying to tell myself, hey, it'll be all right. Look at me, I'm over here. You'll make it all the way, you know, decades and decades later, you'll make it all the way here.
Exactly.
But then on a day like today, it gets difficult and you have to take a different kind of care for yourself, and you have to literally talk to yourself You have to tell yourself the good things about yourself.
Yes.
You have to tell yourself the good things about the people you know. You have to remind yourself that there is love in the world, that there is a resistance out there, and that you are a part of that resistance. There is a resistance.
Yes, absolutely.
I get frustrated with folks saying that things are the same as they always were. Things are not the same as they always were. And if they were the same as they always were, I wouldn't exist, you know? And I really want to believe in myself and other people that I love as proof of progress and as proof of a resistance that actually does work. Of course, it works slower than what we would like, but it works.
Wow. Well, I can tell that.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we kind of are going over on our allotted time. So if we could, start to bring in that thought and kind of wrap it up for this portion. I'm really sorry, but it's going to be hard to edit out all the great footage we've gotten anyways. So
Okay.
Maybe what I can do now, we can make that the last question, and I can read 2 poems that they can use for the sort of teaser that was talked about earlier. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Like father. My father's embrace is tighter now that he knows he is not the only man in my life. He whispers, "Remember when," and "I love you," as he holds my hand, hungry for a discussion of Bible scriptures over breakfast. He pours cups of coffee I can't stop spilling. My father's embrace is firm and warm now that he knows. He begs forgiveness for anything he may have done to make me turn to abomination as he watches my eggs scrambled soft. Yolk runs all over the plate. A rubber band binds the morning paper. My father's embrace tightens. Grits stiffen. I hug back like a little boy, gripping to prove his handshake. Daddy squeezes me close, but I cannot feel his heartbeat, and he cannot hear mine. There is too much flesh between us, 2 men in love. You can use that, or you can use this one too, and I'll read just one more. This one's that first one was from my first book, but this one's one of the last poems in the tradition. Cakewalk. My man swears his HIV is better than mine, that his has in it a little gold, something he can spend if he ever gets old. Claims mine is full of lead, slows you down, he tells me, looking over his shoulder. But I keep my eyes on his behind. Say my HIV is just fine, practical, like pennies, like copper. It can conduct electricity, keep the heat on or shock you. It works hard, earns as much as my smile. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're
Richard.
so grateful for you, and it's so nice to meet you. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to talk. We obviously could go on for much, much longer, but we certainly appreciate you being here and being with us on this 14th annual Coming Out Day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank y'all for having me.
You.
Thank you.